Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University School of Education, SOE. Bachelor of Education, B.Ed. English. First year. Courses on Enhancing Professional Capacities, EPC. BESL 121 Reading and Reflecting on the Texts. Block-1 Understanding, Reading and Reflecting on the Texts. Unit 1 Reading. 1.1 Introduction. Let us take the case of two students in Miss Radha's class, Rohit and Sahil. Miss Radha is a new teacher in class 7. Rohit is in her class. Miss Radha gave him a passage to read. Rohit began reading the passage as a string of words. He didn't pause, and he didn't allow time for meaning making or comprehension. He just identified words and continued to read them one after the other. Miss Radha then got Sahil to read the next passage. Sahil began reading the text, pausing wherever he saw a comma or semicolon or a full stop. He gave himself time to understand what he was reading to his class. Who do you think was reading? Rohit or Sahil? Or were both reading, only there being a difference in their capabilities? 1.2 Objectives. After reading this unit, you should be able to times explain the concept of reading, times apply pre-reading strategies to your own classroom teaching, times identify the purpose of reading for each piece that your students read, times develop worksheets to help students read across the curriculum, and times apply strategies to build the reading habit in your students. 1.3 Reading, Meaning, Purpose and Process. Reading, meaning. To understand what reading means, let us see how researchers have defined it. Times Anderson et al. 1985 defined reading as the process of constructing meaning from written texts. It is a complex skill requiring the coordination of a number of interrelated sources of information. Times Vixen et al. 1987 called reading as the process of constructing meaning through the dynamic interaction among 1. the reader's existing knowledge, 2. the information suggested by the text being read, and 3. the context of the reading situation. Times Tordsen et al. 2007 added another dimension to reading by using the term reading proficiency. They say, reading proficiency at the end of elementary school requires that students be able to identify the words on the page accurately and fluently, that they have enough knowledge and thinking ability to understand the words, sentences, and paragraphs, and that they be motivated and engaged enough to use their knowledge and thinking ability to understand and learn from the text. We want to emphasize that motivation to understand and learn from text is a critical component of reading comprehension. Times the National Governors Association, NGA, a public policy organization that works with the various governors of the United States of America in its policy document, A Governor's Guide to Early Literacy, Getting All Students Reading by 3rd grade, 2013, explains that reading proficiency requires 3 sets of interrelated skills that develop over time: language and communication, mechanics of reading, and content knowledge. Using these definitions, we can say that reading is a complex skill where the reader constructs meaning using the reader's prior knowledge, material covered in the text, and the context in which the reading is taking place. To understand the concept of reading further, we need to keep in mind that reading is effective only when it has a purpose. Reading, purpose. A reader's purpose defines the entire reading process. It sets the stage about how the reading process is going to be. In order to understand how purpose affects reading, let us take a piece written by Pichert and Anderson, 1977, titled The House. The 2 boys ran until they came to the driveway. "See, I told you today was good for skipping school," said Mark. "Mum is never home on Thursday," he added. Tall hedges hid the house from the road. So the pair strolled across the finely landscaped garden. "I never knew your place was so big," said Pete. "Yeah, but it's nicer now than it used to be since Dad had the new stone siding." "Put on and added the fireplace," said Mark. There were front and back doors and a side door which led to the garage, which was empty except for 3 parked 10-speed bikes. They went in the side door, Mark explaining that it was always open in case his younger sisters got home earlier than his mother. Pete wanted to see the house, so Mark started with the living room. It, like the rest of the downstairs, was newly painted. Mark turned on the stereo, the noise of which worried Pete. "Don't worry, the nearest house is a quarter of a mile away," Mark shouted. Pete felt more comfortable observing that no houses could be seen in any direction beyond the huge garden. The dining room with all the china, silver and cut glass was no place to play. So the boys moved into the kitchen where they made sandwiches. Mark said they wouldn't go to the basement because it had been damp and musty ever since the new plumbing was installed. "This is where my dad keeps his famous paintings and his coin collection," Mark said as they peered into the study. Mark boasts that he could get spending money whenever he needed it since he'd discovered that his dad kept a lot in the desk drawer. There were 3 upstairs bedrooms. Mark showed Pete his mother's closet, which was filled with furs, and the locked box which held her jewels. His sister's room was uninteresting except for the color TV, which Mark carried to his room. Mark boasts that the bathroom in the hall was his since one had been added to his sister's room for their use. The big highlight in his room, though, was a leak in the ceiling where the old roof had finally rotted. Think. Times if you were a burglar, what areas would you focus on while reading the passage? Times if you were a homebuyer, what areas would you focus on? You would notice that as a burglar your reading would focus on what valuables were kept in the house and where were they stored, while as a homebuyer you would read about the number of rooms, the decor, and the areas where you would have invested more money. The same piece of literature had a purpose specific to the needs of the reader. We can classify the purpose of reading into 3 categories. Times reading for pleasure. When we read for pleasure, the reading material is of our choice and based on our area of interest. Because it belongs to an area of our interest, we are easily able to make connections between the text and our prior knowledge. Such a reading satisfies our intellectual and emotional pleasure. Common example of reading for pleasure is when readers read novels or magazine articles to know about the latest technology in their field. Times reading for literal understanding. This reading answers the basic questions of how, when, why, where, and what. It aims at helping the reader understand the context in which the piece was written. It helps the reader understand the vocabulary and concepts associated with that topic. For instance, Sunil walked around the new Ford, got behind the steering wheel, and smiled at himself in the review mirror of his most recent purchase. The literal meaning is that Sunil just bought a new car. Reading for analysis, interpretation, and application. Such type of reading happens when the reader engages critical thinking skills like questioning and reflection with the text. The reader not only considers what the author is saying, but also tries to dwell deeper into what the author is implying. The reader also looks for ways in which the information read can be applied to different situations. A good example of such kind of reading happens when teachers use open educational resources, OERs. OERs are free, open source resources that teachers can use, adopt, and adapt. When teachers adapt the given material to suit the specific needs of their school and students, they are engaging in the reading process where they are analyzing and interpreting the text to best suit their purpose. Now that we have understood the meaning and purpose of reading, as teachers, we should make efforts so that our students enjoy reading and enrich their learning. In order to do that, we need to remember two things. 1. Reading is a skill. 2. Reading is a process. When we say reading is a skill, it means it can be developed in students provided the approach to develop the skill is well tested and methodical, and that is why reading is also known as a process. Like all processes, if we follow certain steps, students can enjoy the meaning-making complex skill of reading. Reading process. We are going to use the 5-stage reading process as discussed by Tompkins. 2006. Understanding and using each of these steps will not only help you but also your students become better readers. Stage 1. Pre-reading. In the pre-reading stage, the reader sets the purpose for which the material is being read. It could be something as simple as reading the latest novel of your favorite author or reading the material so that you gain deeper understanding of the concept. As a teacher and even as a reader, a good idea would be to connect the material either to past personal experiences or to prior literary experiences or anything of special interest. Another good strategy employed by teachers to engage students in reading exercises across the curriculum is to help them make predictions regarding the text they are reading. When students learn to make predictions, they are automatically using higher-order thinking skills that help them in other spheres of their learning. Apart from helping students make predictions, teachers help students preview the text they are going to read. Previewing the text includes getting a glimpse into the complete chapter that is to be read. Many teachers use thieves as a previewing strategy. Box 1.1 details thieves as a pre-reading strategy. Thieves pre-reading strategy, Munz, 2002. 1. The title. Although it is true that you cannot judge a book by its cover, the title can offer a glimpse into how the unit is shaped. Some questions that teachers can ask students when they read the title of the chapter: what does the title tell you? What do you know about this topic? Refer to the Cool Map in Unit 2 of BESL 122. 2. H heading. Headings are the visible organizers of the content. Teachers often help students decipher meaning of the text by converting the headings into questions or by helping them to weave the headings of the unit to form the summary of the unit. Teaching students to create headings and subheadings when there is a long text helps students to learn in a more interesting manner. 3. Introduction. The introduction of the text offers the framework in which the chapter content is organized. They let the reader know about the chapter goals and objectives. Sometimes when we read any piece, we don't come across a section titled Introduction. In such cases, the first 2 paragraphs of the piece act as an introduction and set the stage for the content to follow in the text. 4. Every first sentence in the paragraph. When teachers want their students to do a very thorough preview of the text, they advise students to read every first sentence in the paragraph. Good writers always make it a practice to structure their writing in such a manner that the first sentence of the paragraph summarizes the concept to be covered in the paragraph. Thus, if a reader reads the first sentence of each paragraph in the piece, she will get an overview of the passage. This strategy is more helpful for elderly students where the written piece is more structured. 5. Visuals and vocabulary. Just like a picture can convey 1,000 words, if any text is accompanied by pictures or illustrations or diagrams, they are very helpful to the readers. Often authors of textbooks use diagrams and layouts to visually represent whatever concepts they have written in the paragraphs. Helping students look for visual cues will help the visual learner learn and absorb the concept better. Also, sometimes in books you would have noticed that new vocabulary is explained in a separate space along the margin of the page or at the end or beginning of the unit. Teachers should encourage their students read the new vocabulary used in the text before They begin the unit. 6. End of chapter questions. The end of chapter questions generally gives a good gist about the concepts and topics covered in the unit. When a student reads them carefully, they get a glimpse of what to expect in the chapter. Generally, questions at the end of the chapter earmark important concepts and topics that they expect the students to know and apply. The advantage of reading questions beforehand is that when the students cover the unit while reading or studying, there is familiarity of concepts and topics because of the questions. 7. Summary. Summary provides a general framework of how the chapter deals with the content and concepts. Students often confess they remember more of topics and areas where they have some prior knowledge or information. Reading and referring to the summary is one such good pre-reading strategy. Box 1.1 Use of thieves as a pre-reading strategy. Stage 2 While reading. In the while reading stage, the process of reading takes place. The reader begins to understand the context in which the material has evolved. Depending on the complexity of the text, the reader might be able to grasp the meaning of the text by reading it just once, or she might have to read it multiple times to understand the concepts covered. As the process of reading happens, the reader checks the predictions made at the pre-reading stage and is able to apply the skills and strategies that help her in the meaning-making process of reading. The reading stage can take place in many ways. Times independent silent reading, often seen when students read in the library or read a novel. Times reading with a partner, often seen in the classroom when the teacher gives a task to be done with a partner. Times guided reading is seen when small group reading instruction takes place. Such an activity is designed to provide differentiated teaching that supports students in developing reading proficiency. And times read aloud sessions, often seen in the classrooms. Apart from teaching students to read the text, it is important for teachers to help them decipher the illustrations, charts and diagrams that come with the text. This would help visual learners work with the text in a better manner. It is a good practice to help students take notes as they read. They could take notes based on the various pre-reading strategies used in the class. Stage 3 Responding. The third stage in the reading process is responding. At this stage of reading, the reader is able to respond to the information given in the text. This response could be in the form of the ability to answer questions, engage in a discussion, or even write in reading log about all what was read. Stage 4 Exploring. Generally, you would have seen that teachers leave the process of reading at stage 3, where they get their students to respond to the text that was read. Leaving the students at this stage doesn't help them develop the skill of reading. It is very important that teachers explore the text with the students. While exploring the text with the students, the teacher can help students make connections with the text and personal experience. Text-to-self connection, help make the connection between two similar kinds of texts, text-to-text connection, and also make connections with the text they read with the world around them, text-to-world connection. You will read more about this in Unit 3 of this block. Also, when teachers help students explore the text, they are able to provide a glimpse of the author's world and discuss the writing style of the author. They can help students memorize memorable quotes and learn new vocabulary. Stage 5 Applying. The last stage of the reading process is when the reader is able to apply what she has read to construct new projects, build thematic maps, connect with related books, reflect and provide deeper analysis of what was read. Also, when the reader is able to reflect on the ideas reflected on, it shows the reader has been able to connect the material read. As a user of the English language, you would have realized the language, vocabulary, and the information you have in general was not built because you read English novels and storybooks. It was because whatever you read across disciplines like science, mathematics, and social studies helped you build your vocabulary and other skills like analyzing, interpreting text, and applying what you read to real life contexts. In the next section, we will discuss this concept reading across the curriculum. 1.4 Reading across the curriculum. The beginning of 2016 has brought a celestial bonanza for all stargazers and students of science. According to the New York Times, for the next month or so, Earth will be in the right spot to see 5 planets appear on a long diagonal in the dawn sky. In an article published in the New York Times, How to View 5 Planets Aligning in a Celestial Spectacle, Nicholas Street Fleur writes, Greg Hogan, an amateur astronomer from Kathleen, GA, woke up at 5:30 a.m. on Sunday with 2 of his sons and went to a nearby wilderness area known as Okie Woods to capture this image of 5 planets as they danced across the dawn sky. The rare celestial performance is set to repeat every morning until late February, creating stellar photo ops for early morning risers. One of the trickiest aspects of getting the shot is simply knowing where to look for the headliners amid the countless bright orbs above. Before his trip, Mr. Hogan used a software program called Stellarium to help him pinpoint the planets' locations. When he got to the park, he used a mobile app called Sky Guide to home in on Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. He said it was challenging to fit Mercury into the shot because the planet was so low on the horizon, and within an hour it vanished in the sunlight. For this picture, he used a Canon 7D with an 8mm fisheye lens with 10-second exposure, attempts to capture the faraway planets with the limited capacity of one's cell phone seems to have thwarted a number of Instagrammers. Though it was about 25 degrees Fahrenheit outside, he said he and his boys, 8 and 5, enjoyed the adventure. I loved sharing this moment with my sons, he wrote in an email. They braved the early morning cold to share that moment with their dad. We all come across such pieces of writing when we read the newspapers or any science magazines. Articles like this help build our vocabulary and our cross-curricular concepts. We learn to understand how one concept of science also helps researchers from other disciplines. Such a reading exercise is called reading across the curriculum. Look at the screen. Fig. 1.3 Sample of non-literary text from Honeycomb Class 7 Insert, 2012. Using various types of graphic organizers can help students read and understand the content that is covered in texts that move across content areas. In the next section of this unit, we will see the types of texts that we come across in the school books, especially those published by Insert, New Delhi. 1.5 Types of texts in our school curriculum. Literary texts are poems, stories, drama narrations that are characterized by elements of symbolism and figures of speech. The main purpose of a literary text is to help the reader understand and appreciate the nuances of language better. Like in Figure 1.2, the author is using adjectives to introduce the story to the young reader. Fig. 1.2 Sample of literary text from Honeycomb Class 7 Insert, 2012. Non-literary texts are found in newspapers, magazines, leaflets. Their main purpose is to give information. For example, Figure 1.3 describes the story of cricket. In many of our school books, we come across narrative text, where the author gives a first-hand account of the incident or event that took place or shares the story from her point of view. Figure 1.4 shows an example of narrative text from Class 8 English textbook published by Insert. On the other hand, an expository text, Figure 1.5 from the Class 8 English book, is a kind of text that is used to explain, describe, give information, or inform. The text is organized around one topic and developed according to a pattern or combination of patterns. Look at the screen. Fig. 1.5 Expository text. Then we also come across technical text in our books. A technical text is one intended to educate the reader in a particular subject or skill and give information about the concepts covered. Science books often have a lot of technical text, as seen in Figure 1.6. Fig. 1.6 Technical text. Another type of text that we often observe in higher classes is persuasive text. Read Figure 1.7. In such a text, the author presents her argument and shows support for the claim made therein. Fig. 1.7 Persuasive text, from Hornbill Class 11. 1.6 Types of texts in education. Just like our school texts that exposed us to various genres of writing, in the field of education we come across many types of texts. It is necessary to know about these texts because we approach these different types of texts differently, and also the pre-reading activity differs for each text. Using different kinds of pre-reading activities will help us understand the text better. Research documents. In higher education, research documents are a major source of knowledge and they help shape future research. These research documents are found either in journals or theses. Every journal has a specific approach to present the research work. Understanding that approach will make reading the research document easier. Theses generally have a specific format. Each chapter of thesis gives a glimpse into the process of how the research took place. In all research documents, we find a section on reference or bibliography that enlists the works that were referred to in the research document. As a researcher and a reader of research documents, one must always skim through the reference section. Times policy documents. You would have read about the Kothari Commission, CAPE Report, NCF 2005, Right to Education Act and other such documents related to education. These documents have laid down the policies which the government has implemented to strengthen the education of the country. Reading the policy document is an interesting exercise because in most of policy documents, the policy think tank also have explained their thought process to reach the policy. They also discuss how they have interpreted the major key terms. This helps the reader build the perspective towards the policy. A good post-reading strategy that works very well after reading policy documents is to have a panel discussion where experts who have worked in the field are called to express their views. In such a panel discussion, one must also include the grassroots executor of the policy. Times textbooks. In a diverse and multicultural country like India, textbooks have become the backbone of the Indian education system. We not only use textbooks in the schools, but also have begun using them in higher education. Although this practice has its benefits, at times it does not expose the students to the various aspects of the topic. It is therefore very necessary that as teachers we also expose our students to reference books. Times reference books. Reference books are those books that are intended to be used to gain information on specific matters. Libraries are storehouses of reference books. Reading a reference book is an intensive reading exercise where the student has the advantage of gaining in-depth knowledge about the topic or the subject. As a reader, we generally see that while reading a reference book, one identifies the relevant portions of the book and reads it to gain an understanding. And if the need be, other concepts covered are also read. Sometimes, over enthusiastic students read reference books cover to cover, which make the whole process extremely cumbersome, leading students to losing their focus. As a teacher, it becomes our responsibility to identify and suggest reference books relevant to our students' area of study, and ones students get hooked on too. Using reference books, the library becomes their favorite place in the school. 1.7 Building the reading habit. As a teacher, you would often be asked by parents about how to develop the reading habit among children, or as a teacher you yourself would have experienced the lack of reading interest in students, especially in today's times when students have ready access to the internet to watch videos and play video games. In this section, we will cover some of the ideas that you can implement as a teacher to build the reading habit in your students. Times encourage novice readers. As a teacher, you can encourage novice readers by giving them short story books which will help them build confidence in their ability to read. Times identify age and culturally appropriate books for your students. Identifying and having access to such books will help you give ready reference to students and parents alike. Times identify a series that your students can identify with. These days most authors are coming up with a series of books like the Harry Potter series, Percy Jackson series, The Diary of the Wimpy Kid, etc. Having a series will help you get the students hooked onto books very easily, as after they finish one book, curiosity will get the better of them and they would want to know what happens ahead in the story. Times book fair. Organizing a book fair in your school also helps students pick and choose books of their interest. It also helps parents be a part of the book choosing process. Schools generally prefer to organize book fairs in their schools when there is a parent-teacher meeting and all parents come to school. This way, both parents and the students get the opportunity to browse through the books. Times create a reading corner and a reading time in the class. If your school and space in the class permits, it is very helpful to have a reading corner in the class where any student can pick up a book, sit and read quietly. Also, having a reading time within the timetable schedule will ensure students only read during that time. Many schools have a period called Dear Drop Everything and Read, where students literally do what is expected. The advantage of having such a period over the library period is that for this period students have already chosen their book and are ready to just read. Times author character reader of the week. Making use of props like author of the week, character of the week, the most prolific reader of the week will only build the students' enthusiasm. 1.8 Summary. Let us go over some of the concepts we have studied. Times reading is a complex skill where the reader constructs meaning using the reader's prior knowledge, material covered in the text, and the context in which the reading is taking place. Times a reader's purpose defines the entire reading process. It sets the stage about how the reading process is going to be. Therefore, it is very important for the reader to know the purpose of reading the piece. There could be three purposes of reading: reading for pleasure, reading for literal understanding, reading for analysis, interpretation and application. Times there is a 5-stage reading process as discussed by Tompkins, 2006. Stage 1. Pre-reading. Stage 2. Reading. Stage 3. Responding. Stage 4. Exploring. Stage 5. Applying. Times reading across the curriculum helps students develop their thinking skills and develop an interdisciplinary perspective for any concept. Times in our school textbooks we come across varied styles of texts: literary texts, non-literary, narrative texts, expository texts, technical texts, persuasive texts, etc. In education we come across many types of texts like reference books, textbooks, policy documents and research documents. Times teachers can employ strategies like encouraging novice readers, keeping series of books which would interest their students, organizing book fairs, organizing reading corners and reading periods in their timetables, etc. to help students build the reading habit. Thank you for listening. We will be back with next chapter.